there, thanks for clicking on this video. You can call me Kay, and this is opinions and not facts. This is a little thing I like to do for myself when I have something stuck in my brain, living rent-free. We give it an evictions notice by ranting on it on the internet. And today I am still thinking about Snow White, so we're going to talk about it more. Now today's art is inspired by the AI Studio Ghibli trend that is going around. Now you can have your own opinions on AI. As an artist, I'm very critical of it, and it does make me quite sad to see Miyazaki's work being kind of used in this way. And so then I started thinking about how I used to trace Studio Ghibli art all the time, and so I was sort of thinking how ironic it is for me to be judgmental of it, and then I used to just steal his work all the time too. So I figured, oh, for old time's sake, why not steal his work again and hop on the trend, and I'll show you guys how the OGs were out there scalping other people's artwork for the internet. So this is me tracing a screenshot from up on Poppy Hill and making it look like Snow White and Prince Charming. Obviously, I'm not trying to sell this artwork for anything, and full ownership of the art style and everything else belongs to Studio Ghibli. Now for today, I decided to be an egotistical little maniac and talk about how I would rewrite the original Snow White Disney movie and how it would be infinitely better than what they did. Still have not seen the new Snow White. I'm still going off of what I've heard and what people have told me. But somehow in my head I have the audacity to think I could do it better. Not to toot my own horn, this is probably more an embarrassment than it is any sort of claim to fame, but I am actually a fairly successful fanfic writer, and by successful I mean my community that I wrote for seemed to really like me. I'm currently communally homeless because nothing has made me obsessed enough to write fanfiction lately, and I'm destitute, but for the fandom I did write with, I was fairly well liked and appreciated because, according to the audience, I had a good ability to maintain the integrity of the character as it was canonically written and put them in new situations. I'd like to think that that means something. It probably means I need a mental institution, but you know what? We'll take it. So anyway, starting out with Snow White, when I first started to think how would I actually transform and write the script or the ideas for the new movie, my first thought was that there's not a lot that needs to be done. The Snow White theme is kind of, you know, love conquers all, and they do a really great job of showing that already. There's not a whole lot that needs to be done to maybe give meat to the story. More than anything, it needs to be embellished. They really were carving down all the niceties and the flourishes when they were animating it because it was so hard to animate at that time. It was very expensive. So they really cut down to the meat and potatoes of the story. So when we're getting into, you know, rewriting, I would keep the basic structure, but now we can embellish and we can kind of flourish a bit and fancify the story. So in reality, there's not much that I would change. What I would do is really just emphasize certain characteristics, add some little details. So that's basically what I'm going to tell you. Now, the big thing that I thought of with Snow White is that she sort of embodies this idea of resilience and goodness. We see that throughout the story. There's good evidence. She is constantly getting back up on her feet and carrying on even in tough situations. And we see that this goodness in her is what influences people. It makes the prince fall in love. It angers the evil queen. It keeps the huntsman from killing her. It makes the dwarves love and care for her. It convinces the animals to protect her, all these different things. What I would do is just sort of give that a embellishment because all the evidence of it is there. So maybe ask more what makes her resilient and good. And I would argue it's the choice. That she's not born resilient and good, that she still struggles the way we do, but she chooses to move on and get back up on her feet. She's brave in that way, and she's strong in that way, and she chooses to be good, even when she has a temptation to not be good, or when she has every right to not be good, she chooses goodness. And I think these two are important to put together because resilience is usually associated with kind of a harder strength, while goodness is seen as a lot softer. So having these two things embodied in her and really leaning into that, I think portrays a really well-rounded and very humanistic portrayal of this young woman. I think it would be good to do almost a live-action Cinderella-esque opening with establishing that her parents have maybe invested in her these ideas of being resilient and being good, and this is sort of the mantra that she keeps for herself even when she loses her parents. And I think it would be really cute to even like throw in like a little scene where maybe she's talking to the birds as she's scrubbing the steps and she's teaching them what her parents taught her, even in the face of being abused by her stepmom. She's choosing this for herself, not just that she is that way. The other thing we need to do is take care of the prince. In the movie it works. You suspend your disbelief. Yes, he just pops out of nowhere and kisses her. It's fine. But in this movie we have the chance to elaborate on him, so why not? So what I would do is I would come up with a reason for him being at the castle. I would have him interact with Snow White more. We can still keep some of the same magic of their relationship and have it be very innocent and light, but see more at least of his interest growing in her. And then have him be involved a little bit more in attempting to rescue and care for her. So we can sort of set this standard that he cares about her and that he is willing to sacrifice things for her. We really want to get them on equal level and equal footing because we fall in love with Snow White through the movie. We should also be falling in love with the prince so that we feel like he's an acceptable suitor for her by the end of the movie. The other thing that I would like to do is play up the relationship between Grumpy and Snow White versus the relationship between the evil queen and Snow White. They both have these notions about Snow White that are unkind. They're both kind of cold to her, but what we see through the movie with Grumpy's relationship is that he is able to be softened and his heart changed towards Snow White, and he grows to love her. And her being resilient and good to him creates more in him. It betters him and it's good for him, and he changes and becomes someone who she can love and trust. On the opposite side, we have the evil queen who would not change. In fact, it makes her worse. And I think that's a very, I don't know, mature conversation to have within the movie without being too hard on younger audiences, that some people will become better based on our kindness and some people will not. And to see Snow White have a happy relationship with someone where she is resilient to their dislike of her is important, in the same way seeing her escape someone who dislikes her is important, you know? There's two sides of this coin. Some people will be changed by our goodness, some people will not, and we put our time and energy into those who will be changed, and those who will not be, we may just need to move ourselves out of their vicinity or shove them off a cliff. Either way. Otherwise, I don't know that there's too much I would change. I think it would be fun to have a little bit more kind of mystery in the evil queen of whether or not her becoming the old hag is revealing her true self versus putting on a disguise. Just because I think that's a fun, ooh, to put in there of like, it symbolically she's putting on her true self to go and kill Snow White. But is she? That's kind of fun. And the other thing is we have more time for the dwarves now. So I don't think they have to be fully fleshed out and nuanced characters, but I think it would be fun to give them more time to be a little bit goofy, maybe lean into their personalities a bit further. And not to toot my own horn, but I do have the absolute best idea of all time that has never been done before and will never be done again, and no one will ever amount to as much as my brain has by thinking of this idea. So I hope you're ready to be enlightened. We need a dream sequence ballet in Someday My Prince Will Come. Like, hear me out. She starts out in the scene singing to them and dancing around with this, like eyes closed sort of dancing and all this stuff. And then at some point it transitions into the dream sequence and she and the prince are like doing ballet together. And it's literally like old Hollywood, dramatic and majestic and beautiful. And the music is swelling and it's wonderful. And we see this moment where she goes to kiss him and it's almost, and then we see her like wake up in bed and just sort of sigh and longingly like stare towards the ceiling imagining. Tell me that would not be like the cinema of the century. It's so good. So anyway, those are kind of the points that I remember thinking like, yeah, those are like the big things I care about. And then this is, in a moment, I'll kind of walk you through the rough maybe 6 or 7 paragraphs I put together skimming through the story. Hopefully I don't interrupt this too much to explain. I don't know, I'm weirdly excited about this whole thing. So we open with the storybook opening. Obviously, we need the book, the fairy tale. We slide into the pages, of course. That has to happen. It's a classic. We open on Snow White as a child, and we get that life lesson about being resilient and good. And then we see her repeating that lesson to the little creatures who love her and who she's in the castle with as she begins to be sort of degraded and abused by her stepmother. We transition to her aging up. She's now a young adult or young woman, however old we decide for Snow White to be. And we see her, enduring. So where the story kicks off is the prince coming to the castle. He's from a neighboring kingdom, and he has come to establish a good relationship with the stepmother queen and kind of do good for their kingdoms. While he is there, obviously the queen is very interested in his attention, and she's this very scarily beautiful woman. And so, of course, it's going to bother her when the prince immediately notices the ragged servant girl who he sees around the palace working. And so what we have is a rising hatred of the queen towards Snow White. It grows and grows and grows as she grows more jealous of his interest in a girl who's not even trying to get his attention, while the queen is maybe trying too hard to keep his attention and have power over him. And so we have the prince watching Snow White from afar, seeing what she goes through, seeing her strength and admiring her and growing interested. And over time, this grows into him wanting to help her. So maybe something like she's carrying a really heavy bucket of water over the floors, and he grabs it from her and helps her. And she does not recognize this as his interest in her romantically, so she's still oblivious to his interest, but it's there, it's obvious. And so we get these initial interactions where he expresses interest in her, he notices her and her good qualities, and he wants to help her. He physically wants to take care and provide. Obviously, for the queen, this is a loss of power, this is threatening, and so she maybe is becoming worse to Snow White, and Snow White's still trying to endure. And I think it'd be really sweet if maybe when she's a little kid and with the birds, or either now, like just have her sort of humming whistle while you work to herself as like a means to try and cheer herself up and endure what she's enduring. Now, we would move into the I'm Wishing One song setup because obviously we are not messing with the music in here. It's perfect. We love it. So Snow White is doing the same thing she does in the original movie. We have the iconic well scene. We have her singing. The only difference is that the prince is actually out taking care of his horse. So we emphasize that he has a similar love for animals and care and compassion for others as Snow White. He's willing to help Snow White, he's kind to her, and even though he has a groom, he is out doing the humble task of caring for his animal, and his animal, loves him in return from what we see. And he hears her singing, and he goes out, and then he does his one song. And Snow White can still be a little bit bashful because this is him professing interest and love, and of course she hasn't realized that he's noticed her, but when she realizes he genuinely means it, she warms up. They have kind of a similar scene to what's in the movie already in the OG Disney version. And of course the queen sees, and this just drives her over the edge. This is when she decides that Snow White being the fairest of them all, she must die. From here, things go on as normal. We have the hunter take her out into the woods. He can't kill her because he sees her as too good and too innocent, and he lets her go. Now at this point, I think this should be Snow White's emotional lowest point because she is cut off from the movie early, so while the movie is almost at its climax, she's out of commission. So I think her story needs to move a little bit faster, so I would let her get really low and really devastated at this scene. She's scared, she just avoided being killed, but now how is she going to survive out here in the woods? And then of course this is when the birds come in and they take her, and not just the birds, but the whole woodland creatures do their thing. She ends up with the dwarves and she rebuilds back her courage to take care of the dwarves. Now again, events continue as normal. Maybe you linger a little bit longer on certain things, like emphasize how Grumpy's dislike of Snow White, while she endures it and is kind to him and doesn't let it get to her, it does hurt, and she is choosing to not let it get to her and to be kind anyway. Maybe we focus more on some of the slapstick comedy between the dwarves. We give them a chance to shine a little bit more. Now, meanwhile, while Snow White is doing well and we're having the amazing dream ballet sequence that I told you about from earlier in Someday My Prince Will Come, on the opposite side, when we have the queen realize Snow White is not dead, I think it would be interesting if she goes and gets the huntsman and is going to execute him or something dramatic, and the prince actually stops it from happening. I think it would be best if maybe the queen does not realize that the prince is figuring out what's going on, so she has this huntsman locked in her dungeon. She's gonna go kill Snow White and then deal with him when she gets back. And the prince rescues the huntsman and figures out what has happened to Snow White. And then he has to go and try and find Snow White and stop her from being killed. Now, I think it would be kind of cool and dramatic to splice in between different scenes from the prince getting out to go rescue Snow White versus Snow White being tempted and eventually taking a bite of the apple. So we have like this rising hope as though maybe the story is going to be different. We've already changed a little bit. Maybe the prince will make it in time. Maybe the story is going to change somehow. What's Disney going to do? Rising hope of the prince is like getting out and going to find Snow White, mixed with the growing kind of doom and dread of knowing like she's not gonna be saved. She's still going to eat the apple. And sort of end at both the high point of the prince being on his way to her and the low point of her, taking a bite of the apple. And that's kind of the climax of the whole story. And I think that'd be really cool to intersplice those two. And I think it really emphasizes the connection of their stories that we didn't have in the original Snow White. Now from here, things would just continue as normal again. The animals and the dwarves find Snow White, they chase the witch down, well, not really witch, the evil queen down, and that whole thing happens. I think that can stay normal. I don't think the prince needs to be necessarily like the hero by destroying the evil queen. I think it's important to let the dwarves and the animals shine because they love Snow White too. And I don't think it takes away from the prince's character if he doesn't get to do it. So we get to the end and the dwarves and the woodland creatures are grieving Snow White, and I think it would be so sweet if he finally makes it there. He realizes he's too late, and the dwarves are so suspicious and scared of him that they're not going to let him even say goodbye. They don't want to let him approach Snow White, and they're defensive. Because I think it'd be great to see them one last bit of protectiveness and just sort of the broken-hearted protection where they failed her the first time, but they're not going to let anything happen to her now type thing. And then to pair that with a reprise of either one song where the prince re-sings to his dead love, just devastated and broken, or he does a reprise of Someday My Prince Will Come, but designed around the fact that he's too late and she is gone. I think it would be really sweet if it is Grumpy who realizes first and is like the first one to like invite the prince over, because he understands, he has such a passionate love for Snow White and he's changed his heart so much that he is now able to, even faster than the other dwarves, realize and accept and change his mind about another person. And so he's the one to kind of, first allow the prince to come over, and the other dwarves follow as well. And then of course the smoochy happens respectfully. He kisses her goodbye, she wakes up, it's all honky-dory, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, and she embraces the dwarves. She's like, saying hello to all the woodland animals, and then because it's just, it's too good not to do, and it's a fairy tale, she gets picked up and put on the white charger, and in the arms of her beloved, they ride off into the sunset, and the music swells at the end. So anyway, that's how I would have written Snow White. It's very vague, it's probably too sappy or ridiculous and no one would ever do it, but it's just fun, and to me it's like the satisfaction that I would have wanted out of a remake without hating the original. And yeah, so hopefully you like my version better, hopefully you like my art. In case you couldn't tell, I sped up the video, but I was fighting for my life. I don't know what is up with my drawing pad, but it is so sticky and it just keeps jumping around and doing the most ridiculous things. So it's a miracle this artwork turned out, but I hope you enjoyed. I would love to hear your version of what you would have done with Snow White if they let you write it, or if you would suggest any edits to my version. And I'm not taking any criticism on the ballet dream sequence, so if you're gonna criticize me about that, don't.